meetings with the neighbors to get input over the last year and a half, beginning in May of 2012, and as recently as last week. We've gotten really good information from the neighbors, good feedback, and we've incorporated a lot of those ideas into this site. The site is arranged in basically 4 quadrants, and you enter, this is Alejandra Avenue, El Camino. Isabella is up here. We have neighbors, as you know, the Brickell Meadows neighbors here, Isabella neighbors here. You enter the site in roughly the same area you enter the site now, off of Alejandra, right here. We have constructed a grand concourse down the center of this site, and what that allows you to do as you enter the site, you can begin to sort yourself out depending on where you want to go. To the right as you come in is a multi-purpose field, which is a soccer, lacrosse, and football field. It's surrounded by a training track, a 4-lane training track. That track is not suitable for competition, so it's geared expressly toward training. The field events associated with track and field are all contained inside the D sections and in off the ends of the track. This will be an artificial turf field. Immediately on your left is the college baseball field, which will stay largely as it is today. It will stay at the same elevation it is in the same location, but we propose to wrap around that field an improved grandstand experience. That grandstand will accommodate 326 people at this point. The thing that's a little hard to envision is this bar right here is they're actually the grandstand seating for the football field, or this multi-purpose field, and it sits on top of this grandstand, this grand concourse. So as you enter the site, you actually go into a very large tunnel with the football bleacher seats above you, and to the left you have the baseball field. That's the way we can fit this fairly dense project onto this site. As you move down through the site, you'll then come out again into where it's uncovered in the sort of second half of the field, or the site. And on the left, you'll have the school baseball field, which will be artificial turf. And it has a similarly developed grandstand seating, just like the college, except it has 434 seats. That field will be artificial turf. The fields are separated by a bar of buildings that I think go a long way to satisfying and solving some long-standing problems we've had with our batting cages. Our batting cages are currently outdoors. These are totally enclosed, weatherproof batting cages, and so they'll be silent once you're outside the building. The rest of the bar are locker rooms for the college baseball team, public restrooms that support this field, ticket booth, and a concession stand. Down on this end is a storage facility for, at this point, for the college. As you move through the site, we have, so you have grandstand seating here, which Rebecca has identified as a noise generator, and that was no surprise to us. So in this iteration, our preferred plan, we have a 2-story above ground is a 2-story building that largely houses locker rooms and coaches' offices for soccer, lacrosse, and tennis. It acts as what could potentially be a 34-foot high sound wall for the bleachers. So the noise generated in the bleachers, we have a barrier here that helps block the noise as it travels north toward Isabella. It also has and you get down to the aquatic center. The aquatic center, as Rebecca noted, is 12 feet below grade. The surface of the water is 12 feet below grade, and it is surrounded by a high wall, so that the total distance from the top of the wall to the water is 20 feet. It's a little more than 20 feet. we use that as a way to contain the sound and mitigate and control the sound that's generated in the pool. The basement level of this two-story building, so it's actually 3 stories, 2 above, 1 below, it walks out onto the pool deck, and that's where our trainers' facilities will be, conditioning, workout, things like that. And as you move down the site, said the baseball field's on the left. This bar along between the baseball field and the creek and then the neighbors is a large locker room for football and school, football and baseball teams. And again, public restrooms and concession stands and ticket booths for the school field. We have wrapped around the aquatic center 8 tennis courts, and they also are protected, or the neighbors are protected from the site by, it says on the drawing a 9-foot wall, it's actually an 8-foot wall. But there is an acoustic wall along this entire border of the site. So it offers another layer of protection for sound mitigation and to keep sound from traveling off the site. What we did in this site was, and we do it at the school, we've done a lot of construction in the last 10 years, as you know. And our guiding principle is that we try to surround our site and our campus with buildings and walls and sound barriers and focus the sound to the center of the site. And we have, to the extent possible on this site, we have employed that same kind of a concept. We are focusing sound into the center and trying to turn our backs on the neighbors and not intrude into their lives. We are proposing a tall net along the outside of the outfield of the baseball fields, and that's solely to keep balls from going into the neighbors' yards. We are proposing not only retaining a lot of the trees, the mature trees that are along El Camino, but interplanting where we have voids when we take out all the shrubs and things, to try to create a visual barrier along El Camino. Likewise along the creek, a lot of new planting in there, and then filling in again along the neighbors along Brittany Meadows to try to create a visual barrier so that when they look out of their homes, they see trees and they don't see us. What am I missing here?
Parking?
Pardon? Oh, parking. Thank you. We currently have 65 spaces on the site, and we have a constant struggle and management issue with trying to keep people from parking on Alejandra. We've had a lot of success with that over the last couple of years, but what we want to do is improve our lie even more. So the 65 spaces are in this area, which now becomes an access road to 142 spaces along El Camino. And we have proposed we not only have an entrance into that parking lot, but an exit onto El Camino. That is just to facilitate sort of the flushing of the site and try to balance out traffic between Alejandra and El Camino. What am I missing?
You can compare this, the sound system for the football field, I think you had that placed so that the sound wouldn't go backwards toward the neighbors.
Right. Is it okay if I talk about that? Well, let me just give you a principle. It's another principle similar to the one that we try to build structures that but keep the sound contained under the site. All of our, any proposed public address or gameplay kind of announcement systems would be designed to, there's that sort of noise canceling technology you can use. You can use smaller speakers with more intervals. And the idea is that the sound systems for the baseball fields and for the multi-purpose fields would be designed to not intrude and not exceed noise limits at the neighbor's property lines. So that's kind of a technological solution. There are ways that you can design those systems. And it really just is a continuation of our commitment that we want to be as unobtrusive to the neighbors as possible and contain our activities on the site. I think Rebecca noted, we obviously have no plans to use the fields at night. We're not allowed to light fields at night, and we have no intention to do that in this project. So that's it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
I have one quick one.
Okay.
And it's just a note on one of the things with the nets. The nets are gonna be pretty big nets, right?
To be effective, to be maximally effective, they need to be about 30 feet tall.
Right. So the question I have for the EIR is those are on the path of a bird flying to the trees right behind him. So was that, I didn't see that highlighted at all in the EIR in terms of whatever impact there would be on wildlife in that area. So it's a big catcher of birds too. So it's again, just something, I'm looking for the things that we would want to highlight, not that it would be a final decision point, but it's something that a big net would be a potentially issue.
Well, again, this is
Yeah, I
part of
understand.
our discussion.
I understand.
I think,
I just want to make sure that I didn't miss something, any
no.
Yeah, David, I think you just showed us all the ins and outs of option C,
Mhm.
but the whole EIR, the bulk of the EIR was directed at the main project. Why the reason for the switch?
I think there were issues that occurred that we discovered by having the football field. Rebecca spoke to this. By having the football, this is as was originally proposed, and I guess you call that the main project. With the football field being up here, and we had put it up there to try to get it as far away from the neighbors as possible. And it turned out that we got it too close to Isabella, neighbors. So, and the only mitigation to that, and there is a mitigation to that, but we wouldn't be allowed to build it. And that is a 30-foot sound wall along that border. We found one, we priced it, we know we can build it, but it wouldn't be acceptable. So, what we did was we said, well, we're never gonna be able to build a sound wall there that would be effective. So why don't we take a look at how we lay things out on the field, and we basically started with just taking this bar and flopping it and saying, all right, what does that look like? And that is why we ended up with this. Now, it's not an exact flop because we also modified the track arrangement to make that better for us as opposed to the original track. But that was the intent of that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll now open the hearing to members of the public. We would be limited to
Can I go first?
Yeah, would you give your name and that?
Good evening, Chair Christensen and members of the commission. My name is John Braskamp, and my wife and I reside at 35 Isabella Avenue. We've lived in the neighborhood for 10 years and are happy to call Atherton our home. As a preliminary matter, I want to point out that I am not opposed to this project. Both my children went to Menlo School. I've had an 8-year relationship with the school. My kids participated in the school's athletic programs, including those on the Carton field. I am concerned, though, that the draft EIR does not fully and fairly analyze the environmental impacts of the proposed project. I don't think the current situation is acceptable, and I fear that the situation will only get worse if the project is approved. My comments tonight are intended to provide only a summary of my concerns. Prior to the close of the comment period, my attorney will submit a letter containing all of my concerns on the draft EIR, as well as what I view to be essential mitigation issues. First of all, the project description is misleading and inaccurate. The project will lead to additional usage by participants and spectators, yet the EIR makes no meaningful attempt to quantify the increased usage or assess the impacts. This is especially true with noise. The project proposes to significantly increase the allowed noise levels on site, yet the draft EIR contains absolutely no analysis of this proposed increase. Instead, the EIR treats the increased noise levels as a given, which is plainly wrong and contrary to the CEQA process. The school's proposal to more than double the allowed noise levels on site is a non-starter and must be rejected. The project must be designed to comply with the town standards, not the other way around. Further, the proposal to address noise impacts by swapping the location of the aquatic center and football field doesn't solve the problem and only makes the matters worse from a neighbor's standpoint, since aquatic activities will be year-round as opposed to the occasional football game. Also, traffic and parking issues have not been adequately addressed. Specifically, the potential for cut-through traffic and on-street parking were ignored by the EIR. The school and college should have to monitor the traffic and parking on nearby streets and should be required to fund calming improvements if there are noticeable increases in traffic volumes, speed, noise, or on-street parking. Further, to discourage such traffic on Isabella and other streets, the El Camino access must be reconfigured to allow traffic to exit only. In other words, there can be no right turn in from El Camino. Thank you for your consideration of my thoughts on the draft EIR. I look forward to the town conducting further analysis in response to my comments and imposing appropriate and enforceable mitigation measures on the project to address any and all significant environmental impacts. Thank you.
Do we have any questions, Speaker? I understand that your attorney will be sending a letter prior to.
Yes.
Okay. Next speaker.
Rose Howe, 15 Isabella Avenue. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. We own a house bordering parking fields. And I guess I'd like to start by asking this question. Who wouldn't object to this project going in their backyard? Who wouldn't object to it? You know, with its massive size and scale, who wouldn't object? But having said that, it's true we purchased a lot that was close to this field, but it's also true that the activities, traffic, and noise have escalated over the 20 years that we've lived there, 20 plus years. So where do you draw the line? How much is too much? Again, is it that they have unfettered access to redevelopment? How much, where do you draw the line again? So this is not a case of growth versus anti-growth, building versus non-building. We have real estate developers within our midst of neighbors who oppose this project. So that's not the case. It's not anti-youth sports. Some of us have children who've gone through the sports programs, used this field, as John has said. We're not opposed to that. It's a question of noise, traffic, and aesthetics. You know, how can we reasonably, we're not asking for the moon and the stars, how can we reasonably enjoy our home and backyard under these circumstances? You know, I'm not quite convinced of the noise mitigations or anything else that's been described so far. And the way I look at it, I've been involved with town matters for 18 years. I think people are kind of familiar with me. But I look at it as a town issue now. Now, not just a neighborhood issue. Now, this driveway going onto El Camino really scares me. Recently, 2 of the 3 candidates at the candidates forum have mentioned that the most dangerous stretch of traffic is between Alejandro and Selby Lane on El Camino, and they plan to do something about it. Now, my question is putting a driveway on El Camino, whether it's unidirectional or not, going to create a more safer El Camino stretch. In this, we've had accidents, we've had injuries, and we've had deaths. And this is what the campaign promises have been made, for this, to make this area more safe. So again, what will be the impact of the 168 cars be on this driveway? And this is not a driveway that represents like a gas station or a grocery store where people come in randomly. It's a driveway where people come in, they come in all at once to hurry in at a game, to hurry in and make the practice. It's all at once. It's not just this random, gee, I think I'll get gas today, gee, I think I'll pick up some milk today. So think about that as the usage of this driveway and how it's going to impact El Camino. Plus, what happens if it's unidirectional? You decide that you're going to drive in there and you find out that you can't drive in, you back up on El Camino. Really? You back up when cars are speeding by 45 to 50 miles an hour? Really? Okay. So anyway, Alejandro, for as long as I've been involved with the town, has been a problem. And we're not supposed to mention past problems, but it still is a problem nonetheless. How will this additional 168 parking spaces impact the poor, suffering residents of Alejandro and Brittany Lane? I don't see it yet, and I'd like to get a further clarification how they're relieved of all this parking problem. So noise. I think John talked about the noise issue. They're requesting a doubling of their noise level ability. And they're comparing it to Holbrook Common Park. There's no comparison. Holbrook Common Park has Little League, 4:30 to 7:30, Monday to Fridays, Saturdays, 10 to 5, and no Sunday activity. How can they compare that? We are going to have 7 days a week of this activity, noise, sports generating in our backyards. How would you like that in your backyard? You have the ability to control this for us. Aesthetics. Okay, as we move on. This is a quite dense project. Now, the question is, does the density and appearance of the sports complex conform to the principles of our general plan, which is to promote the image of a bucolic community? So I asked you that. So what we need is, before we move forward, a clear traffic study of how the parking and the additional cars will impact the study. Whether this density is just too much for this area, a neighborhood. And we need a clear sound analysis, taken from all year round, not just in January, which the EIR implies it's taken. We need all the sports represented all year round, which is what they're going to be using this field for. Once you go forward, we can't move back, because what I'd like to talk about is enforcement in this town. We know that we have a problem with enforcement. We don't have the capability or staff with the police to enforce this. They shouldn't be doing this. They have more important matters than we've called and said, there's a car parked on Alejandro, in front of my house, pull it away. So what we need to do is move forward with a design that requires little oversight and therefore little opportunities for violations. And I don't think this plan or this concept goes near that at all. So this is a really complicated situation. I don't think, I'm not sure we can even reach a win-win for everybody, but in its present state, I think it's a lose-lose for both the town and the neighbors.
Do we have any questions of Rose? Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Ann McNerney. I live at 1 Watkins Avenue. One of my first questions would be for the representative, Rebecca, to ask why the people who live across from Cartan Field, across El Camino, were not considered, I think, in this project. You can answer that after I finish saying what I'm going to say. The amendment, the proposed amendment that they want to Section 8.16.05H, Cartan Field Amendment, I would like the wording to be changed, because it says about it not exceeding 75 dBA when measured at any adjacent residential property. Well, adjacent is a very narrow, as Rebecca mentioned, word, which just means people within 500 feet of the property. As everybody knows, when there is a football game at the present field, the noise is obnoxious. It is far exceeds, I'm sure, the limit. I don't know how it gets enforced. John said the present use is unacceptable, and certainly the future use would be unacceptable. In the report, they also say regarding this amendment, there's a quote from the, I think, Common Handbook of Environmental something or other from 1994, and a 5% increase in the sound decibel level is perceived by the neighbors as a doubling. Now, the proposed amendment wants on Sundays to increase it from our present limits of 50 to 75. That's a 25% improvement, which is like, what, a quadrupling, or maybe times 5 noise, and from 60 to 75. So I really feel that the issue of noise was certainly not adequately addressed. And everybody knows that the sound walls that have been built, even if they built a 30-foot sound wall on the north end of Carton Field, it would just make the noise hop over 2 more blocks, because that's what's happened on Ralston. Now it's quieter on Ralston, but now they can hear it in the hills in Burlingame. This is what happens with the sound barrier walls. I don't think anybody wants that either. I wonder why the site, I'm not familiar with the scope of lands owned by Menlo College or Menlo School, but I'm kind of wondering why perhaps a more centralized site was not considered. I don't know if that would annoy more single residential houses. In the beginning, in the introduction of the environmental draft report, they talk about that mostly across from Cartan Field there are commercial buildings and apartment buildings, but they don't mention that across from, just a few blocks up across El Camino are a whole bunch of single residence houses that are severely affected and negatively affected. I have found the sound levels from the present football games very, very annoying, and certainly way over whatever our town limit is. So I would agree with John that I think that there are, particularly in the areas of noise abatement and traffic, that this really hasn't been adequately researched. And I would also say that I think the company needs to consult the people on the other side of El Camino. A suggestion I have is that I don't know if we have any power over the islands in the middle of El Camino, but I suspect this project will go forward, that they somehow, if we have any control over the islands, that large, tall, sound-blocking trees be planted, because we're going to hear it all over Atherton. I don't hear anything from Holbrook Palmer Park, and I agree that the comparison with Holbrook Palmer Park is ridiculous. Thank you. Okay, Rebecca, did you want to answer why you didn't
Oh,
consult?
hang on,
I-
you can't do that.
Do you want to take that?
Well, you can't, this is a meeting to gather questions, areas that you feel have not been covered in the EIR. And it is not the CU,
The town meeting, yeah.
which will occur probably in March.
However, I really feel that limiting the language of, I'm really against the proposed amendment to raise the decibel levels, just
Well,
put it
yeah,
there.
but that will again have to come before this
The
commission.
council.
Well, for us, I assume first,
Yeah. Well,
and
then,
at that time, you can voice your opposition.
Mr. Christensen, could you define what adjacent means to you then? Adjacent residential property, because we
Well,
heard from
I
Rebecca
would-
that it was within 500
Well, if
feet.
you're going to ask them,
Well, I have a clarifying question, if I could. I'm asking, were you wanting to be notified of this item, or you want to be included in the analysis in the draft environmental impact report?
I don't know.
Did you receive a public notice of this meeting in the mail?
I think I did.
Okay, great, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that. So then your question is, you would like your property to be included in the analysis in the environmental impact report?
I think I would want all the properties across El Camino
Yeah.
that were left out
Thank you.
included.
and I think that's a legitimate
Thank you.
request.
Okay, and then if you want to define adjacent to you, what would you define adjacent for, Mr. Christensen?
Our objective, I would think, would be to take in information and then we absorb it and then we
Yeah,
come back with something.
I'm sure
All right, I'm sorry.
my
Okay, thank you.
definition will not stand up in court.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add my 2 cents real quick, we will be sure to take your comments into consideration and have our noise experts respond to that in the final EIR.
Next speaker.
Herman, Phil, good meeting you guys after talking with you a couple times earlier. Paul Getty and Jan Getty, we reside at 6 Brady Meadows adjacent to Carton Field. We built our home about 12 years ago, and first of all, I don't want to be redundant to what's been said because I think we've had some very, very good comments already, so I'm going to strip out some of the things that I was going to say. I wasn't aware with what Rose and John were going to say, but I totally agree with everything that's been said to date. So let me sift through and maybe add a few additional points. I'd also like to say that we've had an opportunity to have organized conference calls with about 20, 22 homeowners immediately in the area of Brittany Meadows, Alhambra, Isabella. We welcome others to join us on those calls, by the way, across the way. And what I'm presenting tonight are some additional comments in addition to my own views that were shared with us from people that weren't able to attend tonight. So let me start with that. The only thing I'd like to add to the noise comments would be that, first of all, I'm a real estate developer. I'm president of a division of a national commercial real estate company, and often sit in on meetings like this, and I've seen the noise issue debated and discussed. Often I'm on the other side of the debate, to be frank. But one of the things that I think would be an interesting mitigation measure to add, Rebecca, would be consideration of continuous noise monitoring. I've seen systems begin to get more installed in cities across the United States, and in talking with Ed Flint, one of the challenges we have is what do we do if the noise is high? And I know we aren't here to talk about enforcement, but a continuous noise monitoring system can add a lot of value, and it would make me feel, and I think the neighbors as well, a lot more comfortable about exactly whatever we agreed to, how that was being attended to. And I've included some descriptions of systems that I've been involved in installing in my written comments that I had forwarded a couple weeks ago. I think that's the only comment I'd like to make on noise. I want to switch to aesthetics. I agree with the comments that Rose made earlier. We moved to Atherton because of its rural, and I like the word bucolic, that's a great word. Its rural bucolic nature, and we've enjoyed it, but I will tell you, much like the other neighbors have expressed over the last 12 years, our quality of life has declined substantially. When we first moved here, we often had friends and neighbors over for barbecues and other events in our backyards on Saturday afternoon, and we're not able to do that anymore. We're now subject not only to a loud PA system. I don't remember exactly when that started, but it seemed to have gotten really louder recently, and it not only deals with play-by-play calls on the games that are held, but it's now playing loud rock music to the point where I can definitely feel the bass pounding in my chest. And I'm a former rock and roll guitar player, so my ears are a little bit bad, but I can still hear it. So that's a real big problem. And I don't think that the noise studies, which were done in January, nor the modeling, which I'd be interested in seeing, by the way, because I may have missed the modeling, and I'm an engineer, so I'm really into those kinds of studies. I'd like to see the background that you assembled and the projections that you used to conclude that the noise levels would be what they are. And in my view, today they're intolerable, and they've gotten much worse in the last 3 years. Switching to aesthetics, and covering a couple more comments, the EIR needs to provide much more detailed specifications on the dimensions of all proposed new infrastructure, along with renderings to what is proposed today. The new infrastructure that's described in the EIR is described in such general terms that it's basically impossible for me to grasp what the final project may look like. Dave McAdoo said, as he was describing it, he used the term hard to grasp. I wrote the note down. Well, it's hard to grasp for me too, and I'm in the business. He described it as being very dense. So at first glance, to us, this project looks like a huge leap forward into more urbanization, commercialization, something that I'd expect to see in downtown Detroit or Pittsburgh or Cleveland, and certainly not in the city of Atherton. There also needs to be more comprehensive renderings showing the impact of removed landscaping along El Camino, which it would be required to allow the ingress and egress for the new parking lot, as well as where other trees that are cited in the EIR will be removed. We believe that the removal of trees will seriously and irreparably impact the desired landscape screening along El Camino and also create added safety problems due to drivers who will be distracted as they drive by the field, particularly when games are being played. The EIR must also show if the removal of these trees will cause our homes to be seen from El Camino, which, if that's the case, would obviously be a very undesirable outcome. More details also need to be provided on the proposed landscape screening. Today, neighbors believe that schools are delinquent in providing and maintaining adequate current landscape screening and are therefore skeptical of what may be provided in the future. The EIR states that a number of trees will be removed, but it is insufficiently precise to allow anyone to understand what is planned and what might be. So again, more detailed 3D pictures and things to let us really know what's going on would be much appreciated. The EIR needs to clarify where netting and the high fences will be used. I think there was one picture that I saw where the netting immediately reminded me of a golf course driving range. And I don't know if any of you think that's a good site or not a good site. I'm a golfer. I really don't want anything like that in my backyard, and I'm skeptical of a notion that there could be adequate screening to block 30-foot high nets, and I'm concerned also about the comments about the birds. But the aesthetic impact to me needs to be better understood with better renderings and drawings related to both the fences and the nets. Lastly, on the aesthetics, if it's true that the games will be held during daylight hours, we really don't see a need for any artificial lighting to be added. In many projects that I've been involved in, the documents talk about mitigation of light, but it's a really tough problem to solve.